guys. It is now August 1st, and it's time for me to film my July wrap-up. I'm really excited about this one. I read a lot of books in July, and I actually just finished 2 yesterday. In the last day of July, I finished an audiobook I was listening to, and I finished an arc that I am going to do a review on. But first, I just thought I would do a little reset. Jen and I have a lot of videos planned for this month, and I kind of want to put them on a calendar. I try to post videos every Tuesday and Friday. That doesn't always work out with our schedules, but I try as hard as I can to have something post every Tuesday and Friday. So I want to try to plan that out and put that in a calendar so I can visualize it and see it and kind of know where I need to be for each day of the month. So we're going to do that, and then I am going to put together a list of all the books that I read and some thoughts about them so that I can film the wrap-up portion for you. So here we go. One of the things that I'm starting this month is this reading journal. I usually do a bullet journal and make my own pages, but I always start those and then I never finish them because there's so much work, and I'm not really artistic, so I use a lot of stamps and a ruler and do all my lines. I can't really draw things, stickers, so I just thought this would be really cute. This is a book Jen found and recommended, so I bought it, and it kind of starts this month for August, so I'm going to start filling this out for my month of August. I'm probably gonna detail in here my booktube things, like my schedule for booktube and when I want to post videos and what videos we're gonna post, so that I know what books I need to be reading for that. There's a monthly goals page I'm going to fill in, and then this reading is habit page, which I think is so cute. It helps you track your reading. There are some reading prompts and books that are discussed, and then there is a weekly breakdown in here, which I will be using to kind of list what I'm going to be doing on a daily basis. Really excited to start doing this and journaling this stuff in to help me kind of track my reads. I'm also on Goodreads. If you want to follow me on Goodreads, I put that in the description for this video.
Hello and welcome to the July wrap-up. I had a very successful July, reading 6 books, when June, only 3. So I doubled the amount. Plus, I did read a couple short stories. I reread The Lottery, and I had read short stories from these 2 books for Summerween. So definitely very successful. The other success in July, we read every day for the challenge for American Cancer Society. And thank you to anyone who donated to American Cancer Society. I appreciate it. We did post every day about it with links. So if anyone donated, I do appreciate it, because it did personally affect me, as many of you know out there. So thank you for all of that. So I'm going to dig into what I actually read in July. I think you guys probably have seen our spicy vlog. We read Touch of Darkness and American Queen, not American Princess, as I kept calling it on some of those videos. I did enjoy doing this a lot. It was a lot different than what I normally read, and I felt like it was something that was just vastly out of the arena that I never have read as descriptive as it gets in American Queen. So if you are looking for a hugely spicy book, that is definitely the one. But you can see all of our thoughts. Me and Amanda both have read this and reviewed it in that spicy vlog. You can go ahead and click on that one to get more of our thoughts on that one. So those are the first two that I had in July.
I had a very good reading month for the month of July. I read 10 total books, and a lot of them were really good. I'm really happy with the quality of books that I read and the entertainment value, and I just had a great time reading in the month of July. The first book that I read is a super cute YA kind of adventure book, and it was called Daughter of the Pirate King by Tricia Levensetter. And I just kind of loved this book. It is a very cute YA kind of mystery action, I would say more action type book. You're following Alosa, and she's the daughter of the Pirate King, and she has been trained her whole life to be a pirate. She can fight. She's very witty. She's very resourceful. She's very smart, and she has been sent on a mission to infiltrate the ship. She's looking for a map, and there are 3 pieces to this map she's looking for that have been given to different pirates, and she's looking for the piece that's on this ship that she's supposed to infiltrate and take back to her father. Now, in order to get on this ship, she lets them capture her. So she's the captain of a ship, and they're out in the seas, and she finds the ship that she's supposed to infiltrate, and they kind of attack her, and she pretends to lose the battle and let them take her onto their ships as their prisoner. So on this ship, you have 2 brothers that are running the ship. There's the captain, and then there's the co-captain. The co-captain, Raiden. And Raiden is kind of her main contact on the ship. He kind of is responsible for taking care of her. The captain of the ship, which is his brother, is very cruel and kind of has his own agenda with her. They want to use her as leverage against her father. They have no idea she's voluntarily come on the ship. Their mission is to use her as blackmail against her father and hold her as like a prisoner, and her mission is to sneak around on the ship and find this missing part of the map that she's looking for. So you got a lot of action, a lot of fighting, pirate fighting. You've got very cute banter. She's a real smart aleck. She's real quick and whippy, and there's really cute banter in the book. This is just a really great adventure book. I mean, there are twists and turns and surprises. It's just a cute little read. It wasn't very hard to read, and it didn't take a lot of time because it's a YA book. And actually, I was able to grab the sequel in the series to this book, and I am gonna try to read this month in August.
Next, I read The Only One Left by Riley Sager, the first that I read by Riley Sager, and wow, I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. I was completely sucked into this storyline. I thought it was just well done, well paced, and I couldn't put this down. I finished it very quickly. I did hear from a couple people and a couple reviews that this is the best one from Riley Sager, but I may still dip into something because quickly he became someone I would want to read more books by. In this one, you see the perspective through Kit McDeer. She's a young caregiver that has had some interesting things happen to her. And I say interesting, but it's almost like I would say traumatic. And you get bits of it along the way. You kind of are strung along as to what exactly happened to her. And she ends up having to take a job, like the only job that she can take, which again, I feel like there's a lot of plot lines with this. I feel like I said this in a recent vlog because that has happened in a Frida McFadden book. And there was another book that is escaping me right now, but there's always, I think it was Hidden Pictures, that there are young women that have circumstances where they end up having to take the one and only job that they feel like they can take. And then it's usually a really shady type job where you end up in a situation like she does. And that's being a caregiver to the infamous, in this story, Lenora Hope, who is the equivalent of Lizzie Borden, who is suspected of killing her whole family, and she survived, and she was never convicted because I guess they didn't have enough evidence, and she hasn't really spoken since. So she takes on this caregiving role, and she ends up really getting kind of close with Lenora. And then there's a lot of twists and turns along the way. Obviously, I'm not going to say anything to ruin it or give any of the story away in case anyone wants to read it, because you really need to experience those twists and turns. But this was a fantastic book. I gave it 5 stars. I loved it so much. I thought it had such great pacing, and I loved every bit of this book. It took me just a couple days. So definitely loved this one. And that was the next one I had read in July.
The next book on my list is actually an audiobook that I listened to. It's called The Night Swim by Megan Golden. And I listened to this audiobook because I have the second book in that series called Dark Corners that is coming out in August, and I really want to read this and do a ARC review for this book, but this is the second book of the series. The Night Swim is the first book of the series, so I wanted to go through that one first. In The Night Swim, you're following a podcaster named Rachel, and she is the top of the game. She is like the prime true crime podcaster, and since she's been in the game, there have been copycats coming up trying to, vie for her spot in the true crime podcaster realm. And so this season she is following a rape trial that is taking place in a small town. There's been a little fraternity Olympic swimmer, Golden Boy, that has been accused of rape, and it seems like everything is set up in his favor. He has rich, powerful parents, and he's this golden child, and all the lawyers are saying this is a lie. She's trying to ruin his Olympic dream. And of course she's saying that she was at a party and that he raped her. And so Rachel's following this trial in this case. So she comes to this small town to attend the trial and report back to her podcasters about this case. A weird thing about this really small town is that there's been a woman that has contacted Rachel and asked for Rachel's help in solving the murder of her younger sister. Her younger sister, Jenny, was murdered years ago, and her sister keeps trying so hard to solve this murder. The cops have given up on it. It seems like no one's interested in it anymore. They barely even talked about it in the papers when it happened, and they kind of chalked it up to just some, accidental drowning. But her sister knows that that's not true, and she has asked Rachel to help her. Over the years, she's sent several letters and requests to Rachel to ask for help. And then finally, Rachel is coming to her town on an unrelated rape trial, but she takes this opportunity to contact Rachel again, and curiosity gets the best of Rachel, and she starts kind of in her spare time looking into this old murder, and that's when the book really takes off. There's a little small town Ocean City vibe. There's a murder mystery. There's the rape trial going on. There's all these influential, rich characters that think they can get away with everything. And you're really kind of thrown into this couple of different mysteries that Rachel's trying to figure out. There are people that seem to be stalking her, and she can't figure out why. You're kind of trying to solve this mystery along with her. And it was a very entertaining book. I'm really excited to read Dark Corners for the follow-up book, which is coming out this month, and I will let you guys know what I think of this one, of course, in an ARC review. But the first book was really good. I thought it was pretty well paced, and I really enjoyed listening to the audiobook for that one.
And I had dragged this from June into July, and I've been wanting to read this now for several months. And it was described as being Silent Patient plus Da Vinci Code with a sprinkling of Stephen King. Very accurate, very, very accurate. And I got very sucked into this story, but when I had read that description, even though the sprinkling of Stephen King was, put out there, you're reading along, and I didn't really feel like it was, any kind of book that would necessarily scare me. And there's a bit in here about a third into the book where it goes over the diary of this girl that the main character, Mike Brink, that he's reading this diary because there's a character named Jess that is suspected of killing her boyfriend, and he's trying to understand her because she's a piece of a puzzle. And he's really good at solving puzzles because he had an injury when he was playing football in high school. And the way his brain injury worked, he's able to solve puzzles very quickly. He just they have a name for it where he is now like super smart because of the way his brain was injured. But when he's reading this diary, you're suddenly in her story. And I was reading this one night, and it's about dolls. And I'm trying to think how much I want to give away because I don't know if this is necessarily going to ruin a book if someone wanted to read this. But there are dolls, and Jess is staying at this house that it's another girl that's taking a job, that she's in a shady situation. I mean, this is really, I feel like I never realized this was like a plot point before. That you're just like, a single girl out there and you need a job, you're desperate for a job, and you're suddenly in this like horror film. So she has there's this collection of dolls that she has to go over with I don't even know what the woman's job is, but who is assessing the amounts this doll collection's worth. But she's staying at this house, she's by herself, and all of a sudden one night she's in bed, I think it might have even been her first night at this place, and she starts hearing all these noises from the third floor. And again, I know I've said this before, I'd be out of there. I'm not playing. There's no way. I'm not exploring anything. I'm not going and trying to figure that out. I can just get the hell out of there. But she kind of does do that, I guess. I got to give her credit because she starts to explore and something happens that scares the crap out of her. And it also scared the crap out of me. And I had such a hard time sleeping that night. I could not get to bed. And as soon as I was like reading that part, I was in bed. It was right before I went to bed, and I heard my boyfriend like make a noise in the house, and I jumped like 50 feet. And because I didn't expect that part. I know they said Stephen King, but I didn't expect that part. It didn't exactly, I wish it could have stayed, like, because I do love that kind of book, and I wish it could have stayed that way, but it got into, and the Da Vinci Code part of this book, it got a lot of history ended up coming up in this book. And Da Vinci Code did that, where there was a lot of like religious history and a lot of things that you were learning that were tying to a puzzle that was happening in current day. So I feel like there was maybe too much time spent on that because I was headed to a 5 for this book, and I feel like a lot of that history and backstory was a little too much, a little too heavy, and like weighed the story down. It still had a very surprising ending. You really didn't think it was going to end where it did. At least I didn't. And I felt it was a very strong story overall. So if the story had just been a little more quicker with all the history, and maybe she felt like she had to put that all in, and a lot of times I do like having that like history background, but something just made it weigh it down a little bit. But I did enjoy this book. I was glad I finally got to this book because I had dragged it through, I think, 2 TBR videos. But check, it's done.
The next book I finished in July is A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett. The next book I finished in July is A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair. Jen and I did a whole romance reading vlog on that. We read A Touch of Darkness, and for that vlog, we also read American Queen. And I really enjoyed this book. This book was so fun. It was so interesting. Jen and I both really love this book. Jen actually gave this book 5 stars. So I think we're going to try to continue the series and read the next book in a vlog, or at least on our own as we go along. So who would have thought we would like a romance book, but we did really enjoy this one. The next book that I finished in the month of July is the Mindfuck series by St. Abbey. I read a majority, well, I actually listened to these audiobooks through the Libby app, and my library didn't have the whole complete series as one book, each individual book. The Mindfuck series is a collection of 5 short kind of novella type books that tell one big story. So it's 5 mini books into one. So when I borrowed the audiobooks from the Libby app in my library, I had to borrow each individual book, and there was a wait list for them, but I got on the wait list and I did get all the books, and I finally finished the last one in the month of July, and it was a really good series. I can't say that I loved the series. The covers of the books seem very risque, very sexy, but there really wasn't that much spice in those books compared to American Queen or A Touch of Darkness. I mean, there is some, but it's just not like detailed and not what I was expecting from the cover of the book. But you're following in the Mindfuck series. If you don't know, I think most people have read that series by this. I think most booktubers have read the series by now. I'm a little late to the game for that one. And I think most people have probably heard of that book if you follow any channels on BookTube. But you're following a woman who has been through a very traumatic event in her life, and she has come back on sort of like a revenge tour, and she commits very gruesome murders with a purpose, kind of like Dexter. She's been compared to a female Dexter, but you know, she has had training in fighting, she's had training in weapons, she's really smart, she has an accomplice that works with her who is very techie and can help with her mission, and everything's going fine. Her mission is coming around. She does have this really dark side in her, kind of like how Dexter says, what's he call it? His dark passenger. She has a dark passenger in her too. And even though everyone that she kills has a purpose and a reason, she doesn't, you know, she's not a monster that kills innocent people. She does enjoy and get some enjoyment out of the killings. So you're following this woman that is a serial killer, and then one day in a coffee shop, she bumps into an FBI agent, and they happen to start falling in love. And obviously that throws a kink in things because he is looking into all these murders that she's committing, and he's a very good FBI agent, and he has a really good team of people, and he solves almost everything. He's a very kind of uptight, workaholic, kind of perfectionist with his career type person, very serious, and they fall in love. Every single little novella in this book ends on a cliffhanger. The story moves at a good pace. It's interesting. I would strongly recommend the book. I didn't give the book 5 stars. I think it's a little more hyped than it should be, but again, if you haven't read it and you're into dark romance, then I would definitely recommend the book. It was very fun to listen to on the audiobook. I imagine it would be very fun to read, and I think that you should read it if you'd like something like that.
Got done in July. The next one is Rouge, which we just, I think she's editing this now. I already finished the video for my part. This is a very strange book. I'm not going to go too in depth with this because we're going to have a vlog on it. I have not read anything by Mona Awad. She had written Bunny. Still, I want to read Bunny. This is a very dreamlike, surrealistic, I don't even know what other word to use in that realm, journey of a mother and daughter, and they're the heart of this book. And then a very deep dive, I think, into beauty and how being obsessed with looks and age and how you look as a woman can end up killing you, basically. Because the beginning of the novel is about Belle's mother's death, and she has to travel to California to kind of tidy up all of her mother's affairs. And she finds out that her mom was really tied to this place called Rouge, and it is a glass building that sits on a cliff that is where women get treatments. I don't know if it's just women, it might be everyone, but the heavy emphasis is on women. And it was just a very confusing story. So I will really get in deep into my thoughts. I did a lot of video for this one that will be posted either, I don't know if it's going to be before or after our July wrap up. So look out for that one if you haven't already seen it.
The next book on my list is another ARC that I received, which is Ebony Gate by Julia V. and Ken Babel. I've recorded a full reading vlog on this book, and it should be out by now. If it is, I will link it up here so you can check it out. But this book came out in July. It's already out if you want to go out and grab it. But this book was described as a female John Wick with Asian culture influences and dragon magic. So I would say that's a good description of the book. If you want more details about this book and more in-depth description of what goes on and what I thought of it, then check out the ARC review that I have posted and let me know what you think if you've read this book. Another book I read this month is an ARC. It is coming out this month in August, and I read it during Summerween, and it's called North of Nowhere by Allison Brennan. And this book was so surprisingly good for me. There are several characters in this book. For some reason, normally when there's several characters, I have a hard time keeping track of all of them and remembering names. But in this book, it wasn't that difficult actually to keep track of them. Following Kristen and Ryan, who are teenagers, brother and sister, and their father is a notorious and very mean mob boss in LA. And their mother was killed, and their mother's boyfriend took the kids and rescued them out of that situation to safety, and they've been on the run ever since. And their mob boss father, his name is Boyd, has been chasing them, and it's 5 years later, so he's been chasing them and tracking them for 5 years, and for 5 years they've been running. They finally kind of settled down in a really remote town in the mountains of Montana, and they've been hiding out there and having a good life, and they really look up to the person that rescued them. They see them as their dad, and they do not like their real dad, Boyd, because he's an evil mobster, but he happens to find them, and they have an escape plan. They all get in this plane and start trying to fly to the next city, but the plane gets taken down and they are stranded in the wilderness, and Boyd's hunting them and they're running. And Boyd actually has a sister named Ruby who left the family a while ago. She joined the army, and she actually kind of gets in touch with the kids, and she's actually kind of notified that the kids have been found and they're running, so she jumps on the first plane she can get and goes to Montana to help save them. So you've just got all kinds of action. There's a rancher and his son that live in Montana that help track the kids to save them. So you've just got people chasing people. You've got people trying to kill the kids. You got people trying to save the kids. You get a rancher. There's a rancher and his son that you get emotionally invested in this story. And it's just an all around good story. And I just felt this story really interesting, really well paced, and it kept my attention with the events unfolding all along in the book. And there are twists and turns that I didn't see coming. So we'll see. This book's highly recommended. If you want a winter thriller, I would say this is a great book for you.
And then I ended July on a high note. So I've been also wanting to read this one. I think this was like on a April or May TBR, and it got pushed aside. I had time at the end of July, and I knew this was going to be a pretty quick one. It's not that long. I think it's just at 300 pages. I ended up reading this in like 2.5 days. It was another one that I started. I don't know why I start. Like, this one is obviously like horror or thriller, you know. This isn't going to be like, you know, a Disney fairy tale at the end of the night. But I started this right before bed one night, and this book just goes right into it. There's like hardly any preamble. It's just like straight into being chased on the road. And I read like 50 pages that night, may have even been a little more. And it was like riveting because I couldn't put it down. I was just like, geez, it gets right into the action. It's just like crazy. And again, it wasn't that I couldn't sleep that night. I had nightmares. I had nightmares of being chased because of this book. It is a really good book, and I read it in 2 days. I could hardly put it down. It's about two girls, Olivia, and I'm forgetting the other girl's name. I don't see it on the back. I think Laura and Olivia are going to a college party, and they suddenly have headlights behind them on this lonely road. Lonely, of course, it's a lonely stretch of road. And they at first don't pay really much attention. They think everything's fine. And then they basically get run off the road. And then it's a tale of survival. And it takes place over one night. So it is just action-packed. Things are happening. But I would say it's not a thriller. It's horror. Because it was terrifying. It's terrifying. I mean, they are basically... I'm not even going to say. If anyone wants to read this, it is very riveting. If you like horror and thriller and fast pace and action and people, it's just like a horror movie of teens getting chased and trying to survive. If you like that, I did end up giving it 5 stars because I just felt like I couldn't put it down. It was riveting, and I really enjoyed the ending, and I won't say why because I don't want to ruin it. So that was the 6th book that I read. So I'm very happy with July all around. I mentioned The Lottery. I know I have talked about this in other videos. If you haven't read Shirley Jackson, you should. And she had other ones in this one too, but I made sure to reread The Lottery because I haven't read it in a while, and it's just as good. I mean, now that you know what is going to happen, I wouldn't say it's as gut punching as it was the first time I read it because you don't know what to expect, and then you're just like appalled the first time you read that short story, and it's so short. So if you haven't read it, you should definitely read it. And then I read, this really reminded me of Halloween. I'm kind of can't wait. It's so close to fall. I am over the 90-degree weather. Oh my God. And so I also read a couple of short stories in here, and I just saw this, and I don't know if any of you guys ever went to the Strand in New York. I had this sitting here thanks to Hannah, who gave this to me. She was in New York recently, and she went to the Strand. I've always wanted to go there. Huge bookstore. She was telling me about it, and it sounds just fantastic. I don't know if any of you guys ever been there, but I'm jealous if you have. So let us know in the comments if you have read any of these or anything that these books are making you think of that you think that we should read. We are on to August now. We're going to start off with The Wishing Game, which I'm going to be reading next, and I can't wait. And we just did our TBR for August, so if you haven't seen that, you should take a look. But otherwise, see you again in a month for a wrap-up. Bye.
Another audio book that I listened to during Summerween is The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. I kind of co-read / listened. I borrowed the audiobook. I also borrowed the ebook in the Libby app. And so sometimes I would sit in bed and read the audiobook. I would sit and read the ebook, and then I would switch back to the audiobook when I'm doing chores or driving. So I did read / listen to The Last House on Needless Street. And this book is such a crazy book. The writing is stunning. I understand why Jen loved Catriona Ward's Looking Glass Sound, which is coming out this fall. I think it's coming out September, maybe October. I can't remember. Maybe August. I don't know. Don't hold me to any of that, but it is coming out. And actually, I think Looking Glass Sound is coming out this month. Jen got an ARC of that book and loved it, raved about it. I think she gave it 5 stars. So I was curious to read about Catriona Ward, so I found this in the Libby app, and I thought, why not? This looks like a great summer ween book to read. So I did, and this book is so hard to explain. You're following Ned, who is obviously a disturbed individual. He's a man. He has mother issues. He lives in this home with a daughter, which is clearly abused, and a cat named Olivia. And you kind of switch points of views from him to the cat. And it's just very interesting. I reading the book, I was thinking, what the heck is wrong with Ted? Like, you know, he goes to a therapist, so there's some mental issues, but is he just slow? Did he have like an illness or get dropped on his head as a child? I kind of felt sorry for him because he's like obviously a special needs type situation, and he is living in this house. The house is not well taken care of. The cat talks about how the windows are boarded up. He seems to have this freezer that he drilled holes in the top end so he could keep something in there without it suffocating. So just really odd. And then you're following a woman whose sister disappeared years ago when they were kids. The woman's name is Dee, and she has a sister, Lulu. And when Dee was a teenager, and she has a much younger sister, Lulu, they're playing at a lake with their parents, and Dee's supposed to watch Lulu, and Lulu goes missing. And Dee is trying so hard to find her. The parents are freaking out, obviously. Lulu never gets found. Lulu's never found. Dee is all grown up, and she is trying to solve the missing case of her sister. Now, Ted was a person of interest originally when the child went missing. He was one of several people that were interviewed. So Dee is trying to follow up on this lead, and she's trying to kind of spy and stalk Ted to find out what he's up to. Does he have her sister locked in his house? Is he a bad person or not? She feels very strongly that Ted is the person that has abducted her sister, and he's keeping her sister locked up in that house. So you're kind of getting 2 points of view here, plus the cat's point of view. And other points of views, I think, come in kind of later into the book. So, you know, you are going along this ride trying to figure out all these little details, all these little mysteries, and it was just a very enthralling book. I was very curious to read the end. I personally don't like the way that the book ended. There's a certain trope in this book that I'm not a big fan of, but I certainly want to continue reading Catriona Ward. I felt like the book was genius. It was very well thought out. It was easy to read. The writing is very pretty, but I hesitate to say pretty because it's such a dark book, and she writes horror novels. But it's kind of poetic, I guess, the way that she writes and describes things. It's very easy to read her writing and just get really vivid pictures in your head. So I'm definitely going to keep reading some Catriona Ward books. I don't know what book of hers I'm going to read next. Maybe I'll go out and get Looking Glass Sound, since Jen gave that book 5 stars. I very much want to read that one. So we will see what lies for me and Catriona Ward in the future. The next book I listened to on audiobook is A Twisted Love Story by Samantha Downing. And I did receive a galley on NetGalley of this book, so I'm going to definitely go on there and post a review. But this book is out. It's been out for a while, and it is exactly what the title says, a twisted love story. You're following Wes and Ivy, who are adults. They met in college, and they just have a very dysfunctional relationship. They love each other. There is no doubt about that, but they keep breaking up, and they keep hooking up with other people to make each other jealous, and then they play pranks on each other to get back at each other, and then they get back together for a little while, and then they start getting on each other's nerves, and they break up again, and it's just this vicious cycle. And they have been doing this to each other for over 10 years, but at the end of the day, they are drawn to each other. They are meant to be together. It reminds me of Natural Born Killers with Juliette Lewis and Woody Harrelson. And without the murder, well, it reminds me of Natural Born Killers with Juliette Lewis and Woody Harrelson. Now, these two are not psychotic murderers, but they do get in very bad situations, and they fight, and they hurt each other, and they get in a bad situation, and then they get back together, and then they break up, and then they kind of pit each other against each other. I mean, this is just a messy love story book. If that sounds like something that's interesting to you, I would say this is a great book. I would not say it's a dark romance or a romance at all. Overall, I thought this book was pretty good. If sounds like something you're interested in, you should check it out. The last book that I finished up in July is Boys in the Valley by Philip Ficassi. I'm gonna do a full review of this book. It did come out already in July, so you can go pick this book up right now, which I strongly recommend you do. I was so surprised at how much I loved this book. It's not quite a 5 stars for me. It's probably more like 4.5. But this is a fantastic horror novel. You're following these boys and these priests that live in an orphanage for boys, and it's set in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania. It's set in the winter time. It's very cold and snowy. And that's when everything goes crazy. If you're interested in hearing more about this book, I'm going to give a full review in a separate ARC review video that I'm doing. I will be posting a review of this book shortly. So these are all of the physical books that I have read in the month of July. Overall, really good books. I would recommend all of them in certain situations or to certain people. So let me know if you have read any of these books. Please let me know what you think. That's what makes this whole thing fun, getting other people's views and perspectives and discussing books. At least for me, that's the fun part of this. I really enjoy this community. Stay tuned for more content coming up.